it's kind of like I'm starting to front run this, and I don't want to go down the front run of like, if he was killed, what would have happened? Like, I can't even imagine. Or maybe nothing. Like, maybe people are so like, feel like, oh, there's going to be a civil war, and it's like, I don't know too many people that want to pick up a gun and fight each other. Like, they might talk a big game, and not that that's a big game.
Good morning.
Morning.
There's no getting around it, brother. Let's get right into it. The assassination attempt of former President Trump. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. The fact that it happens, I think, is just sad. It's wrong. It's bad. It makes me think of everything that, is going on in the country, and it shouldn't sit well with anyone. No one should be cheering it for it to be happening to either side. That's not the way, at least in my mind, the good old USA should be operating and people reacting to. I put out a really funny, what I considered funny in the moment post, which was I just segmented my friends list between reactionary Neanderthal and thoughtful human. Because of just the amount of posts and rhetoric that go out. Although I also actually took a moment to look at my feed, because obviously the algorithm feeds you what you're paying attention to, and it wasn't a lot. So I was like, oh, good, which means I'm probably not paying too much attention to this stuff, and the algorithm is not caring to give it to me. But of course, a couple, 2, 3 always pop in. It's probably the algorithm trying to tease you or goat you into, some reaction and some commentary. But my first reaction is, how sad. What was your first reaction?
It was like a mix between, just sad, for sure, at the top. I don't really get angry about much stuff anymore because it's a pretty low-grade emotion. It was like a sense of surprise, but not surprise. Like, it was like, I can't believe something like that would happen. And then I'm like, yeah, like seems like every day something happens. I'm like, that's crazy. I don't know if I'm just desensitized, Eddie, or what, man. But anyways, it is sad. And it's, at the end of the day, an indication, to your point, kind of like the algorithm of where things are at. And where's that at? I don't know. Like, just wildness. Just friggin' wildness, man. So,
yeah, and all it does is create further division.
Does it? I'm sorry.
I said all it does is create further division, in my opinion.
Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah.
I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, it's like, okay, that's done. I hope we're not a political channel here at all. We're just observing what's happening in the world, mostly around real estate, some around our philosophies on investing and living and so forth. It's kind of like I'm starting to front run this, and I don't want to go down the front run of like, if he was killed, what would have happened? Like, I can't even imagine. Or maybe nothing. Like, maybe people are so like, feel like, oh, there's going to be a civil war. And it's like, I don't know too many people that want to pick up a gun and fight each other. Like, they might talk a big game, and not that that's a big game, but you know what I mean? Like, to actually go to war is a big deal. But I kind of like, okay, moving forward, if this was Biden on stage, obviously, I lean a little bit more towards Republican side. I've voted Democrat before, multiple times. So I'm kind of that independent. And I'm more of a policy voter, if you will. And so, anyways, my point is that I don't have any hatred towards anyone, because, again, back to anger and hatred are very low grade emotions, and they are very taxing on the body and the mind and the spirit. And so I just try to stay away from those kind of emotions. Am I a fan of either one? Not really. Am I a fan of, ultimately, I guess my point is, I would hope that if this was the shoe was flipped on the other side, like steel man the thing, like steel manning is, all right, if this was another way, how would I look at it, right? Like stepping outside of my own perception of the world. I would hope that Biden would go and get independent security, right? Because obviously what was provided, something broke down really, really badly, right? So anyways, I'm kind of now thinking ahead. Okay, it looks like, and most of the polls and seemingly sentiment is that Trump probably will win if he stays alive. Just crazy, man. But anyhow, so if we were talking about this a little bit off, and I think you can tee it up. Like, what would happen, if Trump got in and had to do with real estate and that? I probably just stole your question.
No, I mean, listen, yeah, I love that you're going that direction. I mean, before we go right into that, my thought was very similar. So, I don't lean necessarily one side or the other politically, and so I just see it in a very similar fashion with this very similar calm and clear lens as you just described in terms of and I think I'll leave it with this in terms of politics. I think that's where most of the work can be done, is when two people can be in the middle and see a little on this side and see a little bit on that side. And not only see it, but understand why people would want this versus why these people want that. Just really understand, like, where do those people come from? What is their background? What are their current needs? What are their current struggles? To be able to at least have the empathy to say, oh, I see why they're like that, as opposed to trying to shove your ideology down someone else's throat. And because at the end of the day, what we end up having is whoever wins is 50% of the country is happy and 50% of the country is upset. And so how do you really see a lot of progress through that macro view of kind of where we end up? And then that just always brings me down to, okay, well, what can I do as an individual, as a citizen, as I go about my life? Am I going to impact the highest levels? Likely not. But can I impact my neighbor? Could I help my neighbor? Can I not necessarily care he or she is voting for? And if they trip at the end of the driveway when they're getting their mail, rush over to help them get up? Absolutely. All day, every day. And so I think if we just, work within our community and continue to help each other, I think that's the most rooted, grounded thing that we could do as good humans. And then, I welcome everyone's opinions and we should be able to have that discussion. So it's going to be really challenging, brother. But I think that, to your point, what does this all mean for us moving forward in terms of the real estate space? Because there's definitely, you can kind of see some directions that could come from this with regard to if Biden remains in office or if Trump becomes the new president. And how does that marry into what's happening right now with the DOJ's ruling about what the NAR can do and can't do, or what they're trying to mandate that they do? And then the fall off from that, right? Because now you're talking about not only the NAR in its totality, but then the individual MLSs, because that's one of those things I think a lot of people don't really understand, the general public at least, the fractured nature of our archaic, I'll call it archaic, MLS systems, right? There's little mini boards throughout the country. There's mini boards throughout a state. And I believe Florida is the one that holds the most. But I mean, they all can come up with their own rules. And so it's really going to be really interesting how this all plays out. One of the chatter that I see, or one of the prevailing threads of conversation is amongst realtors is, okay, the ruling has come down, but so what, guys? We've been doing this forever. We've always had buyer agents agreements. And we've always practiced. But on the same time, the flip side, there's a lot of MLSs and agents independently that have not. And they're just like, well, because it's in the MLS, I know I'm going to get paid X amount of money. I'm not worried about it. Let's go see some houses. And so for them, they absolutely have to, have these new procedures in place in order to show property to a potential buyer, meaning a buyer's representation form. So back to my original thought is, how does that change if Biden's president, or how does that change when Trump becomes president? When and if Trump becomes president, knowing full well his real estate rich, business rich background.
I think two things. I think, like Winston Churchill said, you can see the future if you can look into the past. And so let's look at what Trump did the last time he was in when the CFPB was there, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which really came in to do a lot of different things for the consumer. I don't want to go down too much of that rabbit hole on why that organization was brought in, but essentially what it was meant to do was to protect the consumer, and they were able to levy fines and do some pretty gnarly stuff without any oversight. That was the biggest thing that, to me, I was not a big fan of the CFPB. Trump came in and totally just detaloned the whole thing, and it had no way to do much. And that's Trump's thing, is to deregulate. So he took the claws out of the CFPB, and obviously wouldn't let the DOJ couldn't do much from there. And I would say if we were to look at that past, he's probably going to do something similar with this ruling and the efficacy of the DOJ to go after people that don't sign a buyer broker agreement. Agent, doesn't do that, and will the DOJ come down on that agent and go after them because they broke this new law? If Trump gets in, I would anticipate that probably will detalon or not empower any further the DOJ to go after people who don't have this signed. And so maybe it's a law that, there's a lot of laws out there, man, that are buried, that are old laws that were never overturned, that, have consequences for, walking across the stupid stuff. I don't know if you've ever seen some of these dumb laws that nobody, it's in the books from some attorney that did something and got a law passed, and nobody enforces it.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if, given Trump's past, will that be the case? I would offer that I think it probably will. And again, to your point, he's kind of more of a free market kind of person and less government kind of person, or politician, if you will. And he's a real estate guy. So
yeah, that makes me think, obviously, yeah,
he's what?
Yeah. He's a real estate guy. He's got that background. I wonder how, is it going to be a sooner than later thing that he's paid attention to and he wants to act on? I haven't heard him public. Obviously, there's so much going on. We're just one little drop in the big bucket. But I wonder how quickly he would want to act on something like that. That obviously has been the source of a lot of his wealth, which is real estate. I'd be curious to see. But in the interim, what do you think? How do you think agents are going to act? Because you and I, again, a little bit before we hit record, we're talking about what will happen. And to your point too, the oversight and the watchdog effect of the rules. How quickly, how often, will these new rules, really kind of bite agents in the ass? Will they be looking out for this type of behavior? And what about for that agent that says, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and continue doing my business the way I am. You want to see a house? I'll show you a house, no problem. Yeah. And with the either hope, crossing fingers that he or she is going to get paid a commission, or because the ruling really only applies to the MLS specifically, meaning you cannot offer compensation on the MLS or any of these, what you referred to, earlier, of course, any perceptions of an aggregated database, right? Where that is available to the public. That's important distinction as well. But it's going to be also available, that information is going to be available on the agent's website. So if it's my listing, I can, on my own website, say, seller wishes to offer compensation of X. And then that's it. So I know that Bob and Jane want to look at that house. I saw it on your website, Alex, because it's your listing, and you happen to mention that. And I'm not worried. Hey, that's another interesting facet too. I know Alex. He's probably not going to screw me. The guy is above board. So if Alex says on his website or in his marketing materials that, that's really interesting. I pause there for a moment because obviously the representing agent or a listing agent, their brand, their reputation, I think from that direction is going to matter even more. Maybe it's a guy or gal that you thought was shady in the past, and you're like, yeah, I don't trust him. And because the MLS was that layer of security that said, I'm going to get paid X amount. So they were the insurer, if you will. But John over here, or Tim, or Jane, she is an ass. And I've dealt with her before, and I don't care what she says. She may say 3%, but it's not going to be 3%. She's going to try to screw me at the end. That's live. That's real. Like, that's a glimpse into what we as real estate professionals have dealt with that maybe doesn't see the light of day very often. But that does happen. And removing that layer of protection, I kind of took it in a different direction there, but my brain just went there. I'm like, that's interesting. What do you think?
I think to your first point, we were talking about a little bit off. One of the agents in my office actually brought it up last night after our call session that there's a MLS in Northwest Washington that's not going to comply. So that's interesting to see what will happen there. We can pontificate about this. I kind of was thinking about it in the context of, have you ever, I don't know if when you were a kid, like there used to be places that had no swimming signs, right? And we would go there and it was like, who was going to be the first one to jump in? And, everybody's kind of on the shore and it's like, whoever can have the guts that, I'm going to break the rules or whatever. And, first one kid would jump in and before you know it, the whole group was in there. And then there was nobody there to like enforce that little sign that said no swimming. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this MLS in Northwest Washington, which they've been doing the buyer broker for years, and there is I'm reading the article here, NAR's removal of the compensation transparency from the MLS pushes consumers and brokers to make secret deals off MLS. So now, I don't know if we quite call them secret because we're still going to have a listing agreement that's going to have a potential for an offer for compensation. The only thing they'll probably change in there, which hasn't come out yet, is, another clause that says it won't be put into MLS. And the seller is aware of that now. So we'll see how that shakes out. And as that's going to kind of converge with the Trump thing, if Trump gets in, and I'm just kind of going by probabilities, and the probabilities are higher. I don't know. Like, I don't know if the sun's going to rise tomorrow, but the probability is pretty high. So those two things now bleeding into the second thing that you said, the secret deals, you can't aggregate data. You can't even look like you're aggregating data. Where's going to be the check and balance for somebody that does put it on their, to your point, does put it on their website as 3%? I guess the brokerages will make sure that's good. I mean, I know EXP will because they're like hyper compliant on everything as a publicly traded company. So if you have a listing agreement and it says this is the compensation, they're not going to let you screw somebody on a HUD. They're just not going to let you do that because you're setting yourself up for a lawsuit. Like, why would you do that, right? A, it's not being on the up and up, and B, it's setting yourself up for a bigger nightmare down the road if you don't comply with an actual contract, which is that listing agreement. So maybe there'll be some brokerages that don't adhere to that as much. I don't know. I'm sure there's going to be people who try to game the system, and there's going to be nefarious actors that are going to try to game it for an extra percent or whatever because they just don't have scruples and morals. There's just a lot of pontification about this, but I'm really curious to see. This is really interesting how this Northwest Washington thing kind of shakes out. Will the DOJ come down on them? That's kind of like the canary in the coal mine. If that thing they survive and the DOJ doesn't do anything, all the kids might start jumping in the pool, the no swimming sign.
Yeah, I think yes, I think to your point, absolutely. I think that they're going to be, the canary in the coal mine, that they're going to be the example. They're going to be the catalyst for potential change, or at least redirection or clarity as to how we can and want to do this, this just change. How do we want to implement it? And I'm sure if any of the healthy MLSs out there that are proactive and paying attention are going to pay attention to this to see how it plays out, because they're kind of, Washington's kind of dangling themselves out there to see, hey, we're not going to do it. What you going to do? You going to come for us? What? When? How fast? How hard? All of these things. And so everyone was kind of, ooh, I expect that to happen.
Yeah.
And I like that. To me, that looks like a living, breathing institution, a living, breathing industry, a living, breathing element of life where it's like there's conflict, and there's dissent, and there's, it's like, okay, what's going to happen? I'm going to stand here. Oh, you're going to stand there? Oh, well, I'm going to stand here. Well, let's see what happens. So that's always really interesting. And for me as an entrepreneur, and maybe for you too, all I smell is opportunity. An opportunity for change, opportunity for improvement, opportunity for discussion. One of the things, just kind of really off topic, the other day was that I heard that really stuck with me is they're like, because I was watching something about people that are going onto YouTube, and an older segment that's going onto YouTube, and the idea or the misconception that all the content's already out there. Well, you're going to start your YouTube channel? Are you going to create more content? I said, no, but things are always changing. So it's not like everything is an evergreen topic and nothing ever changes. There's so much to share and communicate with each other because all of these things are so fluid. And so I'm taking a nice comfortable seat, and I'm sitting back, and I'm paying attention, and I'm really excited to see kind of what shakes out of this. And then as we move forward, what does this mean for the independent agent, or the individual agent, not necessarily independent in the nature of not being in a brokerage or anything like that, but the individual agent? How will they use this? And then how will they build their business inside of this climate? Also, now you've got to marry not just the rules, but now you got to marry into that the difficulties we have as a market as a whole for buyers and sellers.
It's a lot. A lot of unknown. Yeah. It's a lot of unknown. And I kind of go back to that no swimming sign. And if people feel like agents, if they, and this is kind of almost human nature, if they see somebody else doing something that seems to give them an advantage, meaning in the context of, I didn't learn how to express my value, right? And so, I don't want to do this buyer broker agreement because I just don't know how to explain it. I'm concerned. I don't know how to articulate my value, that kind of stuff. And if they see that they can bypass that discomfort, and that someone else bypass that discomfort, and that they can do that, and then that person didn't have any hammer come down on them, will just the herd start doing that? And then will that kind of converge with the Trump thing and deregulation? And I don't know, man. We'll see how it all unfolds. We could just keep going down that rabbit hole for hours, but we're gonna have to see how this unfolds. I really like what you are. Yeah, we got to keep an eye on this on the Northwest Washington MLS. See what happens there. That'll be
Yeah, and anyone else that comes out with a
litmus
similar arrangement or a sidestepping, if you will, of this, or just a flat out no, that no, we're not going to do that. Because that's what that is. At least that comes off that way. No, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
We don't need to because we've been doing it this way already and it works for us. And then I think that's part of the challenges too, in terms of, working inside this industry is that fractured nature of rules and processes and procedures. I think that's a real bone to pick with our industry, that it's not across the board. If I'm a member of the public for a moment that is already dealing with trying to understand how to buy and sell real estate, especially the younger set who have never bought. And I know we're going to get into this here in a moment in terms of, what does the market look like for them, or really for anyone that's looking to buy or sell right now? How do they get truthful, consistent information? And not truthful because someone's trying to mislead you, but truthful in that, okay, you guys all follow this. This is the playing field. I think, that's something that continues to confuse the public, I believe. And now you're throwing these rules in. I think that, it does. Now, obviously, if you lock arms with a competent local agent, you're going to get probably the truth that applies to you locally and what's happening to you and what's going on locally in your market. And I know that's always something that we always talk about, is to be that, talk about the things that are hyper specific and local to what you are dealing with and what matters to you, not necessarily what's going on in another state or another area, because that's what you want to know so that you can make the best decision for you when you're buying or selling, right? So, but how does this then, if we put this in the context of today's buyer and seller, how does today's buyer and seller, deal with these rule changes and the market challenges right now with the high interest rates?
I don't know if the consumer knows even that much right now. And look at us, man, we're confused. So there's the public, the real estate agent public and the consumer public. We're confused. I don't even think they know much of what's going on. They're getting more of misinformation from what I've seen. Everybody, well, not everybody, but the majority of people that I've talked to that even have any inkling of what's going on have started the conversation with, so I heard realtors don't have to be paid anymore. I'm where did you get that? That's not even close to what this law is about. And there's only really two things. Buyers are meant to sign a buyer-broker agreement with an agent to go out, and MLS doesn't show compensation. That's it. That's it. So where do we, I guess people read into it what they want, I'm going to have to pay less, or I don't know. But I think at the end of the day, it just creates more friction in the whole thing. And gosh, Eddie, you and I have been selling real estate for a long time. There is enough friction with emotion and conveying contracts, conveying value, finding the right, all of this stuff. There's just so much emotion that goes into that, with especially what you brought up, with people not understanding the process. And like you mentioned, especially that first time, or you haven't bought, 3 or 4 homes, you kind of are new to it every time. And for that matter, we've talked about this, I've been doing it for 20 years. And I still, on each deal, I'm like, man, that was, not on every deal, but things will come up where I'm like, man, that was an interesting thing, or I didn't see that coming, or whatever. But to your question, I just think it just creates more friction in an already challenging environment to operate in, both from probably, it makes it less challenging the more experienced the agent is. I'll say that. Now, you can get buyers that are very emotional, and you get sellers that are very emotional. I do think for me, as I've brought my emotion down, I connect with my feelings, yes, but my emotion in a transaction is very limited. And to me, that's one of the core strengths that I've had that's allowed me to be successful over the years. I just don't get emotionally invested in the whole thing due to my experience and my building of myself and understanding where my thoughts come from. Oh, I'm going to lose this commission. I'm going to get anxious and maybe angry, and they did this to me or whatever. It's just settle it down. What is going on here? It's not about you, Alex, and the commission. It's about making sure the customer is taken care of. And as long as I stick to that and I stay in a very pragmatic approach to that, the deals are better. So again, I go on a little bit of a rabbit hole there, but
Alex, you're talking about, from your perspective, a seasoned professional who's not worried about paying their mortgage next month, when we know the vast amount of realtors that are representing and supposed to be serving our public are making less than $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
They're not maybe seeing the service side or servicing their agents with that level of care. And because they may represent the majority that the public may encounter, because there is so-and-so's friend, or, my daughter, just got her license and, give her a shot, you're not going to get that. And I think that's what also makes it difficult for the buying public to engage with us and know who to use. That genuinely some of us are better than others.
You said it, not me. But but that's the point. That's what I was trying to say. Like, it's just going to cause more friction, right? Because it's even for the experienced. I don't know where we would delineate that line. How many deals? How many years? Whatever. This thing, and we've been masterminding with my group on this and training and role play for the last 2 months, and it is still. For me, it comes up, and I'm not really as much in production anymore. It's still, for me, I'm like, man, it tickles the back of my brain of like, God, this is gonna, how am I gonna do this? And then I'm always, because over the years, just have worked through challenge. I'm hardened to that, and accepting of that, and it will work out. I will figure it out. I do these affirmations, but to your point, or question rather. I just think it's going to create more friction and more exactly what the Northwest MLS is saying. It reduces transparency. When you reduce transparency, that means there's not a mutual understanding. And when you don't have mutual understanding, that creates a lot, right? That's where a lot of conflict come from. It's like, I don't understand where you're coming from, Eddie. And if I don't have the communication skills to dig out, or I don't have even the want to dig out, I want to understand where Eddie's coming from. That would be let's try to figure out where we can understand each other, and that's the transparency that we're talking about. Am I going to be compensated? I don't even know if I'm going to be compensated. I got to call the listing agent. I got to do this, and then I got to convey this to the buyer that if they won't, then you pay me. But it just creates more friction. And I think that hurts the consumer, period.
And I think that's counter to what technology in our current world brings forth and applauds and supports, is the lack of friction, the release of friction, the effortless nature of what technology can bring. It just streamlines things. And so these friction points inside of our industry are detrimental, I think. And I think that it signals, at least to me, that there is opportunity for huge change. And I've always been a proponent of that. I think that this friction is not fun. Friction is not fun for anyone. It's not. It's in business, it's just slowdowns, again, in the world that we live in, where we look to optimize and speed up, good or bad. It's not about judgment of whether we think everything should be quick and easy or faster. I mean, there's always that concern that we gloss over things or we're not giving it the human touch. But I think in a world that leans more in that direction, I think that our industry is ripe for those changes, because I'm all here for smoothing out this industry and smoothing out the way you buy and sell a property. I'm all here for it. And if it means that a lot of the roles, like they have been going away for a real estate agent, what my responsibilities are, what my the steps along the way, if there were 73 steps before, now there's only 53 steps that we need to do, right? Because of advancements in technology and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Do I look for a world where our value is down to 12 steps? But those are 12 incredibly important and valuable steps for the real estate agent. That's where the money is. That's where the juice is. I'd like to see that.
I was just thinking, Eddie, because you and I came up in, and you did a lot of REO stuff. I sold REO as a buyer's agent. But what came up for me was when short sales came in 10 and 11, right? Massive friction. Like, the banks didn't even know what barely a short sale was. They didn't have processes and all that. So I think and I do believe, and I love the way that you put it there, like it creates opportunity for the people that actually want to move through friction, right? Find a way through it. The ones that go around it, like there was no going around short sales. Like you were either doing it as a listing agent, or if you were a buyer's agent, you better be able to say to that, but if you didn't, whatever, but buyer, hey, you may not get this property, period. The best case scenario will be in 3 months. Worst case scenario could be I had my longest short sale go 3 years.
Yeah, I remember that. Oh my God.
Yeah, 3 years to close it. Multiple
Cash
buyers, anyways. The whole thing, right? So there was like this giant disruption in the industry due to this effect of, no income job asset, subprime thing. The collateral effects of that created this environment of short sales. No agents knew any. I mean, I'm sure there was 1 in 1,000 that had done one, maybe. And then this whole kind of industry burgeoned from it, or not industry, this aspect of the industry burgeoned where the company that I was with at the time was a small independent. They had a corporate attorney for the company that kind of became like, she knew the most about legal stuff. And so she became head of the short sale division of the company. And they created kind of like a training thing for it. And you had to be certified. Anyways, I remember sitting at this big table in the corporate office, and there was probably, 20, 25 of us in there that had, interest in working short sales. And she got up there at the front of the room and was like, it's going to be long nights. If you need to be around your family, you probably shouldn't do this. You might not get paid ever. She like laid down like all of this stuff that was, everybody was like, she's like, all right, who wants to do it? Who wants to be in this program? And it was me and another dude, 25 of us. Nobody wanted to go through that friction. However, me going through the friction, not avoiding it, I learned about it. I worked really hard. I mean, I worked 14, 15-hour days. I was making calls at 7, 8 o'clock at night because I could actually get in touch with the banks on the West Coast, and a fax would go through without their machine running out of paper. And just before scanning, I hate the date and stuff like that. But anyhow, my point is that then, right then, so I'm doing all this, I'm doing it myself. And another little industry comes in where the attorneys figure out that the banks will pay them. And so they can negotiate the short sale. So I was like, the minute I found someone that did that, I was like, I just got to go out and get these listings, and you're going to do all the work, and you're going to get paid, and I'm still going to get paid? Yes. I was like, oh my God. Because I'd become so good at sitting at that kitchen table, right? Which is a challenging thing, which creates friction. You're talking about people that have lost everything, liquidated their IRAs to pay their mortgage and still lost the house. Like, just horrible situations. And if you can't hold a space and be able to explain how this thing works to somebody there, then that's just not going to work, because they're already mistrusting. They're in lack. They're in pain. They're in just the horrible states. People crying in front of me lost their fortunes. And to just punctuate this point, something's going to come out of this that's going to be a good thing. And to your point, I really like what you brought up. It's like, all of the other things, like, right, you would mention the 37 things or 54 things or whatever that I had to do on that short sale side. 20 of them went away. And now I was just able to focus on the 15, right? So I hope something like that comes out of this, that maybe this pushes, which back then, man, it did. It pushed a lot. Well, we lost like 70% of the agents, which isn't a bad thing, right? So maybe that will start to happen from this, and then it will really shore up the skills of the people that really want to do this as a profession, and the rest can go and do something else. It may sound harsh,
well said. No, you know what? I'm done wearing that hat. I really am. I don't tip all the way over to the other side where I'm an insensitive ass, but I like to be frank. It is what it is, and it's my opinion, but it's also my opinion formed not out of some kind of reactionary emotion. It's I'm paying attention. I've been doing this for a while. I've seen it firsthand. I've heard it from my very close circle. All these things coincide and jive. This is it. If it quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, it's a duck. So, I mean, that's basically kind of where I am. So, yeah, I think a lot of it, to your point, is really going to shake out. And there's going to be new opportunity. I mean, that's how we built our asset valuation company. I mean, I built a whole company just out of that need. Where do we fit into that puzzle of, a house needing to, that's being lost to a short sale, foreclosure, whatever it is. There's so many processes, asset preservation companies companies were coming out and emptying houses and getting the dumpsters and changing the locks and, all of these things. Those were all huge companies, and they still exist. But whole new businesses were born out of those situations. And so I guess that's what I'm getting to, is the entrepreneurial spirit in me is like, yeah, this is difficult, and there's going to be definitely some challenges. But there's going to be opportunity. And if we pull this back to the agent, I also, I want the less qualified, the less committed of our agent population to go away. I do. I want them to go away. I want them to go away so that the public can also see that only the best are remaining, and that you're less at risk of, contracting, doing business with someone who is not as experienced as they should be for, again, likely the greatest asset you're going to manage, own in your life, Mr. and Mrs. Consumer. We need to handle it with all the skill and care and diligence possible. That's what you want, period. And the idea of saving a buck here or saving a buck there in my experience, tends to backfire on you. And so you want the best when it comes to your most important assets, and that's kind of where I'll leave it with that. And yeah, I mean, I that this ties in really well with, what effect do you think? So one of the latest stats that I've seen, it's not really latest anymore, it's kind of an older one. The one we've got is the one from 2023. So it was presented in early 2024 for 2023, and the percentage of real estate agents that left the market were nominal, I would say. I think it was like 3%. So it wasn't a lot, 3 or 5%, I want to say. So it wasn't a lot of agents. Do you think that with everything going on, everything we've discussed, that in 2024, so when we see this report in 25 about 24, that number will be higher or at least consistent to the previous year, especially in light of, and I think a lot of it will be, if I can get ahead with my answer, is I think a lot of it will be they're just scared as to the unknown and how it's going to play out. Not necessarily because they know the mechanics yet of what they have to do, although some of them are probably forecasting the extra work they need to do to your earlier point, branding themselves properly, providing the value, just demonstrating and explaining your value and why you should. Just having to do that extra work will, I think, eliminate agents. But I think the fear, which also touches on a previous point of yours, the work that has to be done psychologically up here, I'm like, do I want to do that? Do I want to be the one that's raising, like you in that room of 25 people, you and one other guy raised their hand, or gal raised their hand and said, yes, I will do this short sale business. I think that, that combination will determine, I think, a higher number for 24 in terms of agents that leave the industry. What do you think?
If I had a gun to my head and not even gun to my head, I would say it's going to be higher. I don't know how it works in the rest of the nation, but our dues come out in October, which isn't a big amount, man. I mean, I've heard people go to other real estate companies because it's like, oh, they don't have a desk fee. It's like, well, it's $85 a month to get all of this. Well, they don't have a desk fee. It's like, what are you really looking at here? Are you looking, price is only an issue in the absence of value type thing, so I would say there's going to be people that $1,000 a month is a big deal. And I'm not taking matches to $100 bills. I'm not saying $1,000 isn't important, but anyways, if you're talking about a business, to keep your business running for $1,000, not really a lot of money. I think there's going to be people that bail. I think there's going to be more than that 3% from 2023. That's my point. And I wanted to just kind of come back a little bit to what you said. I've got nothing against new agents coming into the business. I've got nothing against it should only be experience. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg? You have to get in to do the thing, to get the experience, to get there. So I do believe that that's important to bring new people into the business. Your second point about it's just, you got to be committed. You have to be committed to raising your skills, understanding the value that you can bring to someone with the largest, for most people, purchase of their lives. And so it's just that commitment that I think, as a broader topic, I guess, people aren't as committed to anything anymore. I'm going to do this, so I'm going to do that. And I just constantly see people doing that, and they don't. They say they're going to do something, they don't do it. I literally bringing a new agent onto my team, had a conversation with her yesterday. She's sold real estate before, and I really try to have these conversations, Eddie, and this is for those newer agents out there, or even team leaders that you're trying to get into the business, or you're a team leader trying to bring people into the business. Really, this is the question to ask: are you 100% committed? This is a job. So if you went to a job, it'd be 40 hours a week. This is actually a business. So you're an entrepreneur, and usually in the first 3 to 5 years of an entrepreneurial endeavor, you're going to put in 60 to 70 hours a week, because there's going to you're going to be doing the extra stuff of getting in the corners, and there's just so much. My point is, commitment is hyper critical in this business. And as this is our podcast as the relevant agent. To be relevant, you're going to have to put in a lot of time in that beginning. And that's, what I'm saying, you and I both did it, Eddie. We made it through 2010. We put our heads down and figured out stuff that other people ran away from. And that was the commitment, right? I'm doing this. I don't care what happens. I am doing this. I'm going to show up every single day and give it my absolute best. And so I don't know where I was going with that, but I really want to articulate that, man.
Yeah.
It's just so important to me. It really is.
It really is. And, and that commitment comes in different forms, and the catalyst for that commitment comes in different forms. And, hell, for me, I had two little girls at home that I tuck in at night and be like, oh man, I look at the roof over my head, and the food that needs to be in that refrigerator. And it's like, I got to make this happen, period. And so, for me, that was really, that was it for me. I can't fail at this, and so, but it's been a wonderful industry. It's been a wonderful business. And, and I'm the first one to cheerlead people, that are working hard and get the results. I think that's fantastic. But it also speaks to kind of a broader statement. You kind of alluded to it earlier, is that, it requires a lot of work. It requires a lot of work. And the commitment is huge. And the unfair tease of getting into this industry usually happens when we have a strong market. It's like, oh, like the market we came off of, you're writing contracts all day, prices are sky high. People, their phone was ringing every 10 minutes. I want to buy a house. I want to buy a house. And we were selling them like hotcakes, and not a problem. And so you see that for a glimmer, or just a little kind of a little hint into what's going on. And someone who doesn't know or has gone through the effort of building a business is like, oh, well, this is easy. I'm gonna do this. And then when it becomes hard and you didn't build a business, and you see it, and I'm sure off the top of your head, you can come up with a handful of people that are no longer really around in terms of local agents, that they were hot to trot. They were doing it. They were leasing the white Mercedes, the white E-Class, and or black sometimes. But I'm joking about stereotypes, of course. But I mean, they're no longer around. Well, it's because you didn't build a business, and it requires a lot more than just opening doors. And that's a message to the public too. We do a lot more than open doors, my friends. We do a lot more, especially the good ones and the ones that last. So another topic I wanted to bring up today too, Alex, was the CME group and their predictions, because I'm looking at the data here, and it says, they've gone from 73% to 93%. So a healthy amount jump in terms of the chance of a rate lowering from 5.5 to 5.25. And it's, I believe it comes up in September. So what effect do you think that's going to have on the market? And is it enough?
It as actually an amount that will lower somebody's monthly payment. It's not super, and we frame this properly. The Fed doesn't set interest rates for mortgages. So it's the base of what they loan money out at, and then other people that loan the money from them put more interest on it. And that's why interest rates are 7.5, 7.75, 8%, because they're making that differential off of what they're lending directly from the Fed from. So anyway, just to establish that. So, 25 basis points is not a big move in what it will do. It actually does a big thing for the debt of the United States, which is a whole nother ball of wax, but a big ball of wax that is an elephant in the room that people don't even know is there. Again, coming back to, I do think it will have an effect on the psyche of not only the real estate market, but the equity markets, the bond markets, and it's just looser money. And that tends to set markets off, whether it's real estate, whether it's equities, even gold. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Bitcoin with that. But I think that it'll start to create inflation. And inflation is only an increase in price. It's an increase in something. So it's going to inflate prices of homes. It's going to inflate prices of equities. I imagine gold. I imagine Bitcoin. even though Bitcoin is just so uncorrelated to anything really. Still trying to figure out, like, it seems to be correlated to this, and then it seems to be correlated to that, and then it's not. And so anyways, back to the point, I think it'll create inflation. My curiosity, Eddie, lies around, has the Fed quelled inflation? The CPI came out a couple weeks ago, was at 3. They thought it was going to be a 3.1. So they think that they've got it beat. They're still going for that target of 2%. I think if, over the next couple of months, maybe it will continue to go down. I don't think they'll reach 2. But to answer your question, I think it'll create inflation in the market. Just the sentiment that, things are easier to buy because they're going to cost less because interest rates are going to be lower. So it's going to create inflation. That's what I think is going to happen.
Yeah, I think I see it as progress is progress. I think we're in the right direction. I think we're moving in the right direction. And I think in this case, slow is good. Steady is good. For impact, for consumers to absorb both in their wallets, but also psychologically, be like, okay, it's now this. There's nothing jarring that's going on currently, and so I think that's always kind of a healthy or helpful approach. Do I think that inflation is going to then probably come back up? Yeah, I mean, there's conversations right now, and I'm sure you've seen them too, about the interest rates or the real estate prices coming down in certain markets, and obviously that's always
Absolutely.
kind of clickbaity, right? To a certain extent as well too. But yeah, there's certainly pockets of product, price point, location that see these things, that see the lowering of prices and longer market times, right? Days on market. And those are also nice, good slowdowns to see. And
Yep.
But do I see a crash? Do I see anything on the horizon happening? No. I mean, do you? I mean, I see more corrections than anything else.
No, I don't. I was about to say Harry Dent. Anybody, you ever watch any Harry Dent stuff? Man, he's been calling for a crash for since the last crash. Like, market's going to drop 70, house prices are going to drop by 70%. I'm like, man, you've been calling this for a really long time, bro. Smart guy too. Really smart guy. It's interesting. But no, I don't see any drop in the market, especially if they start to lower interest rates. Like, no way. It's so much sentiment, right? And the stock market is sentiment. Very few people look at PEs. Very few people look at the management of companies. And not that I'm some expert at all. But most people are buying on, hey, that looks like a great stock, or that's going up. And buy NVIDIA, it's going up. And that creates more people piling in because they talk to their buddy at the golf course. I have my buddies at the golf course. Like, man, I made 120% over the last 6 months. You should get in. And I'm like, man, I think maybe it's got another 20% to run, but it's not going to double or triple. That's the kind of stuff that I look for. But anyways, my point is, when people feel like they have money, they spend more. When they spend more, right, then the economy, the GDP goes up, right? Velocity of money goes up because that shopkeeper has $1 more than he had the day before. So he's like, oh, okay, maybe I'll buy that thing for the kids, right? So it increases the overall growth of the economy.
And you're talking about yeah, I mean, you're talking about
cost, though. At
emotion.
What cost? I just got to leave that in there. At what cost does low interest rates? I still hold that back, man, because I'm a hard money guy, and I think that there's some really terrible repercussions from the cost of money not being dictated by the market, right? By being dictated by the Fed. The cost of money, in my opinion, should be dictated by, Eddie, you want to loan me some money? You're like, sure, bud. 10%. Like, and I want 40% down because I want to make sure that I get paid back, and I want to get paid back with interest. Like, that's the market, not the Federal Reserve did this, so then somebody can come on and then add another couple of percent. Like, anyways, I'm sorry, buddy. I didn't mean to step on you there. It's such a passionate subject for me. I have a hard time holding back. Apologize.
Well, what was the trigger there? Just the intervention
Sound
of the
money,
government?
sound money and
Yeah.
inflation,
Yeah.
and that people just don't understand that, like, the big picture here. You're talking about this national debt that is a result of the market not dictating interest rates, printing of money, deficit spending. You and I are here talking about businesses. Like, if you ran your business like the U.S. government runs the government, you would be a business. So I just believe that, there should be checks and balances for bad decisions, poor spending. Like, if I spend on a program that doesn't work, bud, like, that's going to hurt my bottom line. Right? And if I do that too many times, the staff that I have that rely on me for a job, the agents that rely on opportunities coming to them, the staff that supports them, the systems that they use, the whole thing breaks down. So if I make bad decisions about spending, a lot of people are, going to have to go find work somewhere else. So I need to be prudent with that, not only for my daughter, for myself, for my fiscal future, but for the people that I'm responsible for as well. I mean, I'm not like 100% responsible for them, but I take that as an important responsibility. I do. It's not just about Alex making money. Like, this is about helping others that are on the team and the staff, and we get people in the Philippines that we employ. That's a good thing. Anyways, my point was, if I don't make good decisions from a spending side, which that's what triggers me, is the market does not dictate the price of money, and the people that get to spend the money have no checks and balances on how much they spend, and what they spend it on. I'm off my soapbox.
Yeah, this is obviously your thoughts and your opinions and your experiences on that come from you having done the work. And so then that gets back to me thinking, well, how many business owners, whether they're inside of real estate or not, are doing that level of work? Well, not that many, or certainly not the majority. Maybe the majority of the ones that are certainly thriving, but we know that businesses, and I'm talking about larger businesses to the individual, and in this case, a real estate agent who really is their own business. It doesn't matter if they're inside of a brokerage or even inside of a team. It's their business that put this level of care and thought and preparation and commitment to their business. And those are the things that I think we'd love to dive into on this pod is those details, right? Like how do you grow? How do you stay better? How do you stay, prepared? How do you weather difficulties, challenges, conflict, all of these things? And to your point, how do you prepare for the future so that your financial future is secure for you and your family and your daughter? And everyone has a snapshot of that, right? And people that they need to care for and look out for and prepare for. Those are the details that I hope that we continue to get into on this pod. Is the stuff that really helps others, whether it's mindset at the greater scale or really small, practical, tactical things that people can do. New widgets to try. New processes to invest in. I think that's really the value of what we're hoping to do here. What do you think?
I agree 100%. And my soapbox had a lot to do with, and we are going to dig more into this stuff. We just happen to have this really big thing that came up with Trump, and still the NAR thing that I think that needs to be addressed. It's important. It's relevant. And I really look forward to further discussions with you, bro. I appreciate how your mind works and your experience. Like, you're not a person that just has a opinion without experience.
Yeah. And I like to stay inside of my wheelhouse. If I don't know, I'm the first to say, yeah, I don't know, but I'd like to know. I'd like to learn, or I'd like to find out more about that. And part of that is why we're doing that, why this isn't a one-person show. Part of this is because we have similar experiences. Yes, we have a lot of similar beliefs and mindsets. Yes, but there's always that divergence in terms of what did you do? What did I do? How did it go for you? How did it go for me? Those stories are going to be different. And so the more we have that divergence based on this really solid foundation, I think that you and I have as friends and fellow professionals, from there, we can discuss all these things almost without limit. And because we have this greater variety of things to talk about, we're hoping to land and hit with more of our viewers and be like, yeah, that resonates with me. That's kind of how I handle things, or that's my view of things. And the more we're able to do that, widen that up, I think the more people we're able to serve and reach, and hopefully really genuinely help, even if it's just a small thing every time they check in on our pod, which again, we're committed to doing every single week here on The Relevant Agent. So thanks as always, buddy.
Appreciate it, man. Have a great week.
Yeah, and if you guys are not subscribed, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, follow along. These are the kind of topics that we like to hit. Some of this stuff is really evergreen and is going to help serve to grow your business. And others are obviously trending topics that we think are important, that we like to kind of bring into our world, meaning the real estate specific world. How does that affect you? How do you leverage it? How do you grow? And again, how do you stay relevant? Until the next time, my friends.